I would like to tell you a story about one of the worst experiences of my life, and it's happened over the past 2 to 4 weeks. It's all over the news locally here in the Boston area and has ties to California. And at the time of this recording, it's basically making it out to the national media. I have done TV interviews locally here with Channel 4, 5, 10, and 25. So part of the reason why I want to make this too is a reference to hear our side of the story from my family's perspective for anyone that's interested or any other media. So it starts back when I lived in Texas and we got a baby puppy French Bulldog right around March of 2020 in the Austin, Texas area. We got Charlie from a breeder. My wife and I are both first-time dog owners, which I think is somewhat critical to this story. And obviously, right around that time, there was COVID. So right after we got him, we were shut in for several months, just like everybody else. And obviously, raising a new puppy, gave us a lot of comfort. And during that period of time, my wife and I were going through some pretty difficult IVF cycles that didn't really work. Eventually, we did give birth to a very, very healthy baby boy who's now 22 months old, named Henry. And Charlie was, I think, a big part of that in comforting us and my wife throughout the process. So as my son got older, I grew up in this area in Reading, Mass. My parents really wanted to see him more often. My parents are getting a little bit older, and I realized that they really wouldn't be able to come out and visit us that much in Austin, Texas. So we decided to move back to this area in the next town over from where I grew up and in between my parents, like right next to my parents. So we moved back here to North Reading, Massachusetts in the summer of 2022 with Charlie, Henry, and my stepdaughter. And it was a new house, less than a couple years old. And there were many things that needed to be done with a new house, like stuff like assembling furniture, hanging TVs, things like that. And I hired several contractors off of Thumbtack. I don't know if I had used Thumbtack before, maybe once or twice in Texas, I don't remember. But I definitely hired like 4 or 5 different people here in Massachusetts. And I had pretty much all an entirely positive experience. I mean, anywhere from like tree removal, furniture assembly, toy assembly. Somebody came into my house to like help me wire my house with Cat 5 for my office. So I would say maybe early August, like last month, something like that, we decided that we wanted to get our dog Charlie some dog training. He was the absolute sweetest dog in the world. I mean, he loved human beings. He did not really have behavioral problems at all. He just never really learned simple commands like sit, roll over, stay, things like that. And if you're familiar with French Bulldogs, when they get out, sometimes they have maybe a little bit of pent-up energy and they run around circles. Call them like Frenchy zoomies, run around circles. And my kid, 20, 21 months old, sometimes he would get knocked over. It wasn't anything malicious from Charlie. He just didn't, he was a little kid right outside. So there were a couple of very, very minor things that we wanted to work on with Charlie. So I had done a search on Thumbtack for dog trainers, and there were several in the area. And I actually contacted a few of them, and I had multiple ones actually come to my house as well. And after looking at all the ads, I saw some very, very stellar reviews from a company called Wagging Good on Thumbtack, like all really positive reviews. I spoke with the lady who called herself Lily on the phone, and she said she offered a program of board and train where she would take our dog to her house and the dog would live with her and she would train him with some of the concerns that we had for 2 weeks. And we talked about pricing, and it was 3 $750 payments. and that she could start almost immediately. So I spoke with my wife about it, and we were on board because we were first-time dog owners. I was not aware that the model of, say, board and train is commonly, I would say, looked down upon now in the dog training industry. We didn't know that. I'm in the gambling industry. This channel, I teach people how to play poker. I am hyper aware of scams and super diligent in my life behavior to not be scammed. So I'm not the type of person that usually gets scammed. But I didn't really know anything about board and train, that this was somewhat of a troubling or there can be problems when you hire specific trainers for board and train. I did not know that at the time. So we decided to do it. We paid Lily a deposit of $750, and then we arranged for her to come on September 1st to pick up Charlie. And she did. She came on September 1st, and I met her. She spent about a half an hour in my house. She seemed somewhat normal. She said she had a couple of kids. There wasn't any type of like red flags. This is any type of like strange person or anything like that. She seemed like a dog lover. Now, I asked for her full name, and she said she wasn't comfortable giving that. And I also asked for her address. She also said that she wasn't comfortable giving that. Now, maybe at the time that should have had some, put up some red flags for me, but some of the service providers that I had hired on Thumbtack, they didn't really have front-facing stores or locations, so I didn't think that it was that odd. Obviously, in retrospect, I wish I had gotten, her ID or at least a picture of her driver's license. She was also driving a dark colored Tesla, which is going to be somewhat important to this as well. So she took Charlie away, and we had agreed that she would give us daily updates and send pictures while she was training him. And that's basically what happened for the first couple weeks in September. She was supposed to bring him back on Friday, September 15th. And during that period of time, she sent daily text updates. She sent photos of Charlie. There was nothing that was distressing at all in any of those photos. They looked somewhat normal. They were a little bit blurry. They were all sort of outdoor photos, but nothing to raise alarms or anything like that. Part of her program was that when she returned Charlie, she was going to do like kind of a post-board and train session in the house. So I knew that I was actually going to be on business in Los Angeles the day that she was supposed to return Charlie. So I reached out to her a few days before my trip, the 12th or the 13th or something like that. And I said, hey, I won't be here when you return him on the 14th. My family will be, but could we possibly reschedule the post-session training for another day? And she got back to me and she said that was fine. So I go off to LA that Wednesday, still sending text updates, and everything sort of seemed normal. And I fly, and I see in our group text that my wife and I have had on Friday when I'm in LA, my wife asks her, when are you gonna bring Charlie over? I want to go to the grocery store or something like that. And we get a text on that Friday afternoon saying that Lily had broken down, that her cell reception wasn't good, and that she would get back to us later. She didn't get back to us later that day, which I still didn't think was really all that odd because I had just sort of explained to her that I wasn't going to be back until Saturday. So there was nothing, it was just kind of almost like I was asking for a late return. So early Saturday morning, I fly back from Los Angeles back to Boston. Everything is normal. And the minute that I land in the mid to late afternoon at Logan Airport, my wife texts me a screenshot, or I get it on my phone, of this text from Lily to her, not on the group text, saying that something like, I can't apologize. It was this long drawn out thing. Can't apologize enough, but I've been on the side of the road for 15 hours and very poor cell service. Took me forever to get it tow. It was dark, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know how to tell you this, but I feel awful, but Charlie's gone. And my wife was like, what do you mean Charlie's gone? And we try to, my wife tries to get a little bit more of an explanation. And it was very, very vague on the details, but she just kept saying that she doesn't know how it happened. She was, broken down on the side of the road. It was dark. There were some people that sort of stopped to help her, and she doesn't know if Charlie might have jumped out the window because her windows were down in her Tesla because her battery had died, or if someone had just seen him and taken him. And this happened in a town called Royalston. She said it was on Route 32 in Royalston. I didn't even know what Royalston was. I find out that it's about 75 or 80 miles from where we live by the New Hampshire border, sort of northwest of Worcester by Athol. I was like, what is going on? What is she doing up there? So I'm sort of on the plane, immediately sort of freak out. And I try to contact her. I try to text her. I try to call her first. It sort of goes right to voicemail, and the voicemail isn't set up. I learn from my family that my aunt, who's an avid animal lover, called North Reading police right around 2:30 or 3 o'clock to sort of explain the situation, that I was landing, I was coming back, that it was my dog, that my wife's native language isn't English. That's why she was calling, and kind of said, we don't really know what happened, but this dog trainer that has had my nephew's French Bulldog for 2 weeks says that it was lost, and the story seems kind of odd, right? So she also calls North Quabbin Animal Control, which handles lost dogs in that area, to report a lost dog. She also looks at contacting Thumbtack to find that you couldn't speak to a representative, a human, because they were closed for the weekend, and they would open back up on Monday morning. So I take a lift back from Logan back to my house, still trying to contact her, trying to get some details. And she finally says that she will call me later on when she gets better cell reception. So I'm trying to calm my wife down. I'm like, I don't understand. I talk to my aunt and my mother. I don't know what's going on. I walk into North Reading PD, and I speak with the lieutenant that had answered the phone with my aunt. And I, say, the story is true. My aunt called in. We don't really know what happened. He says, well, what do you think happened? I said, I don't know. I know that French Bulldogs are an expensive breed. It's possible that this is a scam where she sold them. It's possible that maybe he got out and this is sort of a BS story. Who knows? Maybe it's possible what you're saying is true, but the story just seems very, very hard to believe. And I said, she is supposed to call me later on. He gives me a cell phone number. He says, try to get her to call me before I go off my shift at like 9 p.m. So I was like, okay, that's what I'll do. So I go back home. In the meantime, we start, and my aunt helps me start like contacting different agencies that handle lost dogs in the area, start sort of forming flyers and things like that. So this girl, Lily, the trainer, finally gives me a call. And the call was like 20 minutes. And the first 10 minutes was just like a bunch of kind of like rambling nonsense about how her Tesla broke down and she needs to change insurance companies because she can't believe how she was handled over the phone. And I was trying not to cut her off, but it was just a bunch of nonsense. And finally I was like, tell me what happened. And again, she told the story about how she broke down and she was on the side of the road in Royalston on Route 32. Couldn't really give me an exact location because there weren't mile markers on the road. Later we found out there were mile markers. And that sometimes she had paced outside the car to try to get a better cell signal. And after a while, one of the times that she had paced, she came back to the car and she noticed that he was gone, that he had been just laying on the back seat, but now he's gone and she doesn't know if somebody took him or if he jumped out the window or what. And she told me why she was in Royalston, that her 2 kids had a play date. I later find out I don't think she has kids later on. And I was just like, I kept stressing to her in the phone call, please contact the lieutenant at North Reading PD. Before 9 p.m., he is waiting to talk to you. Please do that. And then I went on to say sort of your next steps with what you do if you contact the lieutenant, with contacting the lieutenant, really going to guide me in how I handle this situation. She goes, You don't have to be condescending to me. You don't have to threaten me. And I was like, oh my, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what's going on? And then I said, I'm not threatening you. And then she proceeds to have like what I deem as a mental breakdown on the phone, saying that dog training is her whole life, and that I'm a stranger, and then I'm going to take that away from her. And I tried to calm her down, and I said, Lily, please, just as a first, I said, we're reasonable people. All we want to do is get our dog back. As a first step, please contact the lieutenant at North Reading PD. So she agrees. She will do that. So after I get off the phone, I text the lieutenant at the police, and I was like, I cannot believe that I did not vet this situation more thoroughly. This woman appears to be mentally unstable, but I still can't figure out what happened, really. I don't know. So he says, okay. And he says, did you try to get her to call me? I said, yes. She says she's going to call you. So I get a call from the lieutenant, 9:30 later on that night. Lily has called him. He says that my interpretation of the situation is pretty consistent with his, that Lily was all over the place. By the way, in the original phone call that I spoke with Lily, I asked her for her full name. She would not give it to me. She wouldn't give me her full. I said, Lily, I realize I don't have your name. What's your full name? I don't give my name out. I've had problems with my ex. I will tell the police that if they ask me. I forgot to put that in, right? So the officer says in his report of the phone call, she was all over the place. But I can't really determine what's going on. I asked for her identification, something like that, and she wouldn't give me her full name. And contact him if I get any information. I said, okay. I said, we're going to Royalston to look for Charlie the next day, which is going to be Sunday, which we did. So early Sunday morning, with a bunch of lost dog flyers, we drive out there to Royalston. That morning, I follow up with another message with animal control in the area. They're going to be critical to this particular situation. And we drive out there and we go to Royalston PD, we go to Athol PD, and we go to the state police that's in Athol, basically saying, is there a record of a Tesla that broke down in this area? At the same time, I'm texting Lily too that day. Can you give me a more precise location of where this happened? Where did this happen? And like once or twice during the day, she texted me back, and it was just, again, a bunch of vague nonsense. So we speak with law enforcement. No record of a Tesla being broken down in that area. We call a tow truck company that handles all of the towing in that area. They have no record of any type of Tesla being broken down up in that area. We stop for lunch really quick, and I get a phone call from Animal Control in the area, from North Quabbin Animal Control. Tell the officer the whole story. She tells me the story sounds very fishy. She lives in Royalston. She's familiar with that stretch of road. It just doesn't add up. We drive up there. We drive the route after lunch, and we notice that it's a really, really small country road that at night it would have been pitch black. Maybe a Tesla might have blocked the whole entire road. It didn't look like it was a likely story. We distribute some flyers to local residents as well, saying that, I don't know, there very well could be a lost dog in this area with Charlie's picture. I ask people, did you notice a Tesla that might have been broken down for over 12 hours from Friday night to Saturday morning? Nobody noticed anything. So we drive home. Right after we get home, early evening on Saturday, I get a text from the animal control officer that I had spoken with earlier that day. She says, can you describe, because I had told her that all we had in terms of contact for this person was the name Lily. We didn't have an address. We didn't have a residence for her. She had told me when she was at my house that she lived on the border of a local town. That's all she had said. She wouldn't give a specific address as to where her residence was. So the animal control officer says, can you describe her? I say, yeah, she was white, kind of tall, brown curly hair, glasses. Like, pause. I get a text back. Do you recognize this person? It's her. Animal control texts me back. I said, yes, that's the person that picked up Charlie in my house. They say, this person's name is not Lily. it's someone named Josie Ragland, and follows up with a couple of links to news stories and things like that. And I go down a deep dive and start doing a bunch of investigation online. I find out that Josephine Ragland is associated with a story out of the Bay Area. Bay Area NBC covered a story where somebody with a German Shepherd had hired her and never got their dog back. She attempted to return a different dog, and they were like, this is not our dog. And she went and got the false dog that she tried to get to return to them, and never got their dog back. Following up in that video from NBC San Francisco were other people that had hired this person for dog training off of Thumbtack. Stories of these dogs coming back emaciated, covered in urine and feces, no real training, petrified, and my heart is like just absolutely sinking. And I see in one of the social media posts, there was a discussion about the type of vehicle that the trainer drove, and I saw a comment that said like a dark colored Tesla, and I was just like, oh my God, my heart absolutely sunk, because again, I didn't know at this time if this was some sort of scam or what. I'm hyper diligent against scams. I just thought it was just kind of some crazy woman that was making up a story that lost the dog. So I immediately text the lieutenant and I said, I'm sorry, I'm afraid to say that this is a criminal matter. He said, can you elaborate? I told him a little bit, and he said, he gave me his email, and he said, give me everything that you have. So I packaged up all the information that I had, and I sent it his way via email late on Sunday night, very early Saturday morning. So Monday rolls around, and I think I get contact from him saying that he is opening a case and that they're taking this very, very seriously, and they have some leads and they're going through some investigation. In the meantime, on Monday, I actually reached out to the victim in California. I reached out to the reporter, Hilda, out of NBC San Francisco in California, and I got some more information. There were some other resources where I was getting fed information in California about this Josie's history. So I'm just looking around for, as much information as I can find. This is on Monday. Through Monday and Tuesday, the detective is saying that we are making good progress. We are working with multiple law enforcement agencies. Let us investigate, and we'll give you an update when we can. He was supposed to give me an update on Tuesday. He follows up on Tuesday. He's like, we're really in the middle of this. Give us some more time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to let these guys do their work. And then finally, on the later part of Tuesday, he says, can you come in to the station Wednesday morning at 10 a.m.? And that's what I did. I went into the station at 10 a.m. Wednesday morning. He sat me down with another detective, and he said, I have to tell you, first thing is that unfortunately, Charlie has passed away. He's dead. We have recovered his body, though, and that he's being sent to the University of Connecticut for a necropsy, which is like an animal autopsy. He tells me some other information in that meeting, that they have reason to believe that Charlie passed away as early as September 4th, which was like 3 days after Josie Ragland took custody of him, that the updates and the pictures that she was sending us, obviously after that date, were after his death, that they have reason to believe that she was looking for a different French Bulldog of a similar age to try to return to us, similar to the California German Shepherd case. Then he said that Charlie was being held in Connecticut, and I knew from my research that Josie's parents, mother and stepfather, she had connections in Connecticut, and that they went to the parents' house and found 4 other dogs that were in board and train that were emaciated. They were able to take custody of those dogs and reunite them with their owners. He also said that Charlie was found 30 miles away from that house, and that they had taken Charlie and that they had basically dumped him on the side of the road without a collar, and that that information was conveyed to them, and that Charlie had been recovered. He also then passed along the animal control officer that was on the case for the Department of Agriculture in Connecticut, and how I was to arrange getting back his ashes because he was going to be cremated. So obviously, I was in shock. He did go on to say that there was no evidence of any type of trauma with Charlie. We both had said that the first week of that September was very, very hot. And I stated that French Bulldogs are a very delicate breed, which they are. They have common breathing problems. They don't really pant like other dogs, and they're very, very sensitive to heat. So we kind of went back and forth, and it could have been something as like he, died of heat stroke or something like that. The point was that there wasn't any type of trauma there with Charlie. So obviously I come back and I tell my family, and they're heartbroken. But remember, we didn't know if he had been sold. We didn't know if he had been lost. So at least we knew now that those things hadn't happened. He had been lost in the woods, or he hadn't been sold. I told her that, it seems like it might be related to heat. We won't know until we get the autopsy, the pet autopsy back. So the next day, I believe I call the animal control in Connecticut, who's going to arrange to, get Charlie's ashes back to us. And I talked to him a little bit, and he was saying, yeah, Charlie was found on the side of the road a couple of days after the police started investigating her. I don't know, on the 17th or the 18th or something like that, maybe the 19th. And I said, oh, because the police told me that he died really early on, like on the 4th and the 5th. And he said, yeah, well, obviously he wasn't dumped out there, and he hasn't been out there for, 10 days or whatever, or 2 weeks. I mean, animals would have picked him apart. There was also he goes on to say there was no evidence of like any type of maggot infestation. So what most likely happened was they froze him, and then when they started to get heat on the family, they went and they dumped him to try to hide the evidence. I'm still in contact with the lieutenant. He's saying that he's writing up a comprehensive report that's going to take several days, and that there will be charges filed. I believe he said that in this case, larceny over $1,200, because we paid her $1,500, which is felony larceny, and obstructing a police investigation or lying to police, however that is charged in Massachusetts. So over the weekend, obviously, I'm looking at Woburn District Court to see if the case has been docketed, get information that it's going to be turned over to the court on Monday, and it was. And I went to Woburn District Court on Tuesday morning, and I pulled the complaint, and I pulled the police report, or the police report was attached to the complaint. So this is the information that I had been given. By the way, also, I think that we got really, really lucky with this case, that a lot of things happened for us to even get to this point. The law enforcement really were unbelievable in this case, doing really, really good work. I think we got a little bit lucky where the lieutenant was the one that picked up the phone when my aunt called. We got incredibly lucky that North Quabbin Animal Control was able to feed us that information so that I could package it up to the lieutenant so that they could start an investigation. I don't even know how they came up with it. I don't know if it was just somebody Googling thumbtack and dog scams, but they found out who the person was. I didn't know the person's name, and they found it out. What an unbelievable break. And then North Reading PD also in that meeting said that the animal control officer in Connecticut was an absolute all-star and was critical to helping them with this case. Without him, none of this would have been possible. Also, I believe on Monday, while I was going back and forth with the lieutenant before we had our meeting, I had gotten some information with a direct name about the detective that was in charge of the case in Palo Alto, and I passed that along to him. And that was very critical as well, because that detective had a huge amount of investigation and was able to convey a bunch of information to North Reading PD. So, on to this report. And I don't know how much of this is public. I was able to pull it. I don't know if that's because I was a victim. I'd seen it on a Connecticut station a couple of days ago, but now it's no longer there. So I'm just going to summarize some of the more important parts of this and what are some of the more disturbing parts of this. There was a lot of lying to police in the first 10 to 11 pages. Lie after lie after lie. Obviously, about her breaking down in Royalston, that was just a lie. She just made that up. Originally, they had said that Charlie was hit by a car, which was another lie. They also said that they had buried him in their backyard, another lie, because they went and looked in the backyard and they had dug a hole to try to make it look like he was buried, but he wasn't. And she finally admitted that Charlie had collapsed very early on in his stay, that her mother had taken him out of wherever he was being held, and he just collapsed, like on September 4th or September 5th, which obviously I infer as a thing where he was not properly taken care of. And like I said, it was very, very hot over the summer, that week. So these breeds are very, very sensitive to that type of thing. Goes on to say that she had not been there to care for the dogs at all. That she was on a bender at the casino at Mohican Sun because she was having a midlife crisis, and that her stepmother was the one charged with taking care of the dogs that were in her custody. As a sick, twisted coincidence to this entire story. If you don't know, I'm a professional poker player. I'm somewhat known in the gambling industry. She said that she played poker cash games for profit and craps. And I giggle at that because anyone knows gambling, you can't play craps for profit. But poker cash games, well, that is what I teach people. I teach people how to play poker cash games. And that she was going to the casino before and after work. She had a temporary job at a local restaurant because she was on this bender and was not taking care of these dogs. And I said to myself, I wonder if she knew who I was. I don't know. But I'm sure, especially some of my subscribers that are watching this, apparently know who she was if she was going to Mohican Sun and playing cash games every single day. By the way, some of the information that I had gotten from California during the early part of that week, an organization out there had hired a private investigator, and I got the same story when she was living in the Bay Area, that she was going to a casino almost every single night with her boyfriend in Humboldt County. They would look disheveled. And it also states in here that she admitted that she might have a problem with gambling. In that interview, or in the update that the lieutenant in North Reading gave to me, he said that this appeared to be solely financial in terms of motivation, that she was running this sort of board and trade scam to collect money, most likely for her gambling problem. So to sort of sum it up, she was taking dogs, not training them, not taking care of them properly, putting them in crates, as we'll see here in a second, and then just leaving them, taking the money, and then gambling at casinos. That was, for the most part, the MO. Also, in the police report, they lied about the fact that they buried the dog when they disposed of it, because they found the dog not buried. They found him entirely above the ground, not covered, 10 to 15 feet from the side of the road. When the detective called the parents to ask about the other dogs, the condition of the other dogs, the mother said they were, quote unquote, still alive as the condition of the other dogs, and that they were in crates attached to their sunroom. Also, at first they lied about, or she lied, so many lies in here. I can't, sometimes coming from the mother, sometimes coming from Josie. But they lied about the number of dogs at first that they were taking care of, besides her Dalmatians that she owns. And then finally found out that there were 4. They also lied and said that they were all from Connecticut. Apparently they're from all over New England. And I actually have had some of those victims reach out to me too. And they filed charges against her for larceny over $1,200 and obstruction or, lying to police. Here is the very sad part of this. The gross necropsy findings. There are a couple different levels of this autopsy report. This is sort of the first one that's not super duper in detail. Charlie, a 3-year-old male French Bulldog canine weighing 9.9 kilos, was submitted frozen for post-mortem examination on September 20th. Body condition was emaciated with minimal internal or subcutaneous adipose tissue and severe prominence of ribs, vertebrae, and scapula. There was multi-organ congestion. No evidence of external trauma was observed, with no food content in stomach and intestines. No evidence of external trauma was observed. Multi-organ congestion could be indicative of heat stroke. The stomach and small intestines were empty. The colon contained a small amount of formed feces. The stomach and small intestines were empty. He weighed 9.98 kilograms, according to this report. That's right around 22 pounds. I know that when he left with her, he was 30 pounds. Now, I don't know if there's some sort of decomposition that might go on in between this, but upwards of 25% of his body weight in 4 days, which seems to me that quite possibly he wasn't given any food or water at all, and maybe stuck in a crate. And obviously heat stroke had something to do with this too. Now, I wrestled with this internally about when I was going to find out what happened or what the possible results were before I even knew that they had recovered him. Obviously, it could have been a situation where he was sold to a family, and at least we thought that we could take some solace with that he would be with a family. I don't know what kind of family would buy a French Bulldog off a secondary black market, but somebody would be taking care of him. Or could have been unfortunate that he actually did get out and he's very domesticated and maybe, coyotes ate him or he was eaten by some animals. He probably wouldn't have been able to survive long enough out in the wild. Or somebody might have found him even though he was collared and microchipped, and just took him as their own. You know, I didn't really know that he would go through something like this where he was probably in distress. I can't imagine the noises that he probably made when he was in that crate. I tried to keep a pretty level head the last couple of weeks, trying to get all the information to the appropriate authorities to help this case, but I really did lose it the other day when I posted a Facebook post, because I said, "Rest in peace, buddy. I'm so sorry, but maybe we can stop anything like this from ever happening again." Because I look at this like this is partially my fault for not knowing that this was more of a possibility with Dog and Train. And he was such a sweet dog, and really the sweetest dog that you'd ever want. So the reason why we're making this public and trying to get it out in the news as much as possible is because we want specifically for this person, Josephine Ragland, to never be able to do something like this again. And in California, they didn't use her name because she wasn't charged. Well, now her name is all over the news. And it looks like they're actually going to follow up with charges in California, because in California, they didn't have her admitting to what they have admitting here. And they just didn't have the evidence. They didn't have a dog. They didn't have her story. And now with this case in North Reading, I think it might set forth like a pattern that they can use for evidence against her. So that was number one. I never wanted this to happen again. Number two, I wanted to get the word out for people like me who might be first-time dog owners, that be very, very diligent if you were to hand your dog over to someone for training, whether you hire them off a Thumbtack or anywhere where you don't have references or you don't know the person. I never knew this. If I came across this video that I'm making right now, if I had come across this, I never would have hired her. And I'm just talking about Dog and Train, the concept of Dog and Train being somewhat problematic if you don't directly have references and know the person. Because this was not us handing over our dog because we were lazy. We were trying to do the best for him. And lastly, I have set up an email that I will link in the bottom of this video. I would like other victims to come forward and contact me, specifically ones that might have hired this particular trainer off of the listing Wagging Good, because she was operating here in Massachusetts since May of this year, off of the listing Wagging Good. But before that, in California, she was using the listing Everything Animals, which she had a corresponding LLC with in Rhode Island. My understanding is she was also operating out that name in the early part of 2022 in Massachusetts. And I'm looking for any other victims, and especially if anyone has a story of a lost dog where they did not get their dog back from her. We have all of these stories of neglect, and that is very, very useful too in the animal cruelty part of this. But in the actual criminal matters, it would be very important if there was another story, if it exists, for that to come out where somebody has hired her and they never got their dog back. Somehow it wasn't reported on. that would be very, very useful information to us. As I told my wife, I look now at Charlie as a hero, and I really hope that his death is not in vain.